at the beginning of the nature trail, one of several at St. Mary here at St. Mary of the Woods.
We're interested in looking at this big issue, this global issue of climate change, but bringing it down locally and seeing how it affects our local forest and the forest here at St. Mary's of the Woods.
My name is Sister Rosemary Nudd. I'm a sister of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods, which is where we are standing now. It's our mother house, and it's the place where our founders first came in 1840. And this forest, these woods, this ground has been sacred to us for many, many years.
I'm Jim Speer. I'm a professor of geography and geology at Indiana State University. And specifically, I'm a dendrochronologist. So I study tree rings. I take samples out of trees and study some climate change, but also a lot of forest disturbance. So fire history, insect outbreaks, effects on trees.
Well, Jim, we just began this video and we're surrounded, it seems, in the trail, the nature trail, by all this beautiful foliage and these plants. But here, right here, along the trail, is a dead tree. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so actually as we were walking out here, we were looking at the signs and where to set up, right? And you're saying this might be good because there's a dead tree next to that one, but there's a dead tree here and there's a dead tree there. So it's not just like one tree is dying, but we're seeing dead limbs on all three of the trees, and we've only gone 10 feet so far. So definitely the trees, something is affecting the trees overall. On this one, you can see beetle galleries on there. So you can see this, it looks like carving on the tree, very detailed, but these are actually insect beetle galleries. And it's interesting when you look at what's happening to these trees, they're dying. There's many different factors that can drive that. Let me step back and talk about kind of the bigger picture. So Craig Allen in 2010 wrote a paper called Global Forest Decline and was looking at this concept on every continent that they looked at from remote sensing from satellites. They could see that these forests are dying on every single continent. And there are many different factors that are driving it. Some of it's just increase in temperature. When we look at the meteorological data from Terre Haute, we're 1.5 degrees warmer Fahrenheit than we were in 1900. So the temperature is higher. That causes more stress on the trees, and then oftentimes other things come in and kill the trees. So we think insects, we see that insects will come in and kill trees. Sometimes fungi or bacteria will spread in the trees with the higher temperatures and kill the trees off as well. And part of our idea that this is climate is that every genus is affected. So oak is declining, and ash and maple and beech, all the trees are dying off, not just one type of tree. So, honey, I don't know if you can look up at the canopy for these. The honey locust tree has a few live branches, but it's mostly dying off. Back behind you, there's an oak tree. Looks like a white oak, a nice white oak group. And that has some branches that are dying off on it. So, multiple genera of trees that are declining in this particular area. And then we're trying to figure out what's the cause.
Exactly.
But many of these trees are declining, and if we take cores out of the wood, we'll see that the rings are getting smaller and smaller, more than they should be just from their shape. And these trees are under some stress, declining and dying. And that seems to be where temperature stress is really pushing them over the limit.
I've noticed that often, walking down, for instance, to the St. Mary's post office. All kinds of vegetation on either side, but it's fallen over, or it's dried out, or tons and tons of undergrowth and not too much overstory.
Right. But if you think about it ecologically, the forest is transitioning. The insects are actually speeding that transition. So climate is changing, climate is increasing because humans are causing that. The forests are adapting, and the insects are increasing in population, causing that mortality. So it's causing this shift in the forest.
This isn't my favorite question, but it's one I have. If climate change, God forbid, was continuing the way it is now, would continue as it is now, what can we expect from this piece of what we call our forest, our land?
So there are many components to that. We're talking about mitigation and trying to reduce the carbon emissions that we're doing. Even if we stopped all carbon emissions today, the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is going to be there for 100 years.
Yes.
It takes 100 years for it to come out.
Wow.
So we're going to see this continued change in temperature. We're not on the track of cutting out carbon, so we're seeing an increase in carbon emissions as well. So the IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, just put out their report saying that we need to stop the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're about a half degree away from that. We're already pushing that direction. The Paris Agreement was trying to hold it at 2 degrees. But the provisions that are in the Paris Agreement are not enough to do that. We'd have to do a lot more. We had an economist come and talk to us about who worked on the Paris Agreement for the United States, and he said, in his understanding, his belief of where we're going to see 4 degrees Celsius change by 2100. So even with our best efforts, holding it steady is going to be very hard. So that's going to be a lot of stress on this forest.
Absolutely.
And the forest will change. A researcher, Catherine Hayhoe, who's also done a lot of activism, but she looked at specifically Indiana and Michigan and projected what it would look like in 2050 and 2100 based on different climate scenarios. And they were saying that Illinois is going to look pretty much like Texas or southern Texas for the vegetation.
Oh my.
And coming here, there's 20 different tree species within a 10-minute walk of where we're standing. So it's great diversity. There's a great mix of species. And we're going to lose a lot of that. These species are going to die off as they propagate. If they survive, they're going to be surviving further north. And we're going to expect more southern species coming in here and dominating. So you're talking about the migration of trees across the landscape. The rate of the current climate change is much faster than what we saw after the last glacial retreat. So we as biogeographers are concerned that trees won't be able to keep up with that climatic change, that they're not going to be propagating fast enough across the landscape. So if you think about how a tree moves, or its genetics move across the landscape, an oak tree has to grow up to sexual maturity, produce acorns. Those acorns have to fall, which is usually by gravity, so they're moving 10, 20 feet. That oak has to grow up 20, 30 years before it produces acorns, and it can go another 20 or 30 feet. We do get long distance dispersal from birds that will pick up an acorn and drop it somewhere. So that's kind of the long distance that moves along, but trees don't have a lot, they can't themselves move themselves across the landscape. So they have to depend upon these birds. And it's a slow process to move across the landscape. And this climate change is happening so quickly that it's hard for the trees to keep up with it. The other thing is invasive species. And well, non-preferred species. A lot of these invasives that get a hold and survive here thrive in these odd conditions. Like they're generalists, they don't need the specific habitats. Kudzu is one that's down south, and they're projecting that marching up this direction. So it's in Tennessee, but it's not much in Indiana right now, and we expect a lot more of that, which can actually, the vines can grow up and shade out the living trees and kill them off. And we were talking about that nature will be fine. We're really killing ourselves off more quickly. But a large portion of that is how many other species are we going to bring to extinction with us. And right now, that rate of extinction is so quick. We talked about the 6th mass extinction. So if we look through geologic time, we see 5 in the geologic record, where you have somewhere between 50 and 90% of organisms going extinct in different environments. We're seeing that rate happening as fast today as what we see geologically. So the meteor impact that killed off the dinosaurs, we're doing that same scale of impact right now. So
I don't remember the quotation, but in Pope Francis's Laudato Si, Our Common Home, he mentions really early that what right do we have to cut off the life of a species, you know, even the teeniest, smallest microcosm, let alone the larger ones. We have no right, but we're doing it right and left. Looking at our foundress, St. Mother Theodore Guerin, who founded the Sisters of Providence and our college and came to this beautiful place, I was thinking about her awareness of how the wilderness, as she called it, affects the human psyche, the human spirit, because we know that happens too. She often refers to us as daughters of the forest, and that's one of our most precious titles as Sisters of Providence. And I think it's also a responsibility that may be even more than some other people. I don't know, we all have a responsibility, but this is our home. It's been our home for more than 175 years. And as daughters of the forest, we need to give our mother creation and our mother earth and our mother the forest as much help and as little difficulty and death dealing as we can. It's a big responsibility, and it's a sacred one. You're welcome. Thank you, Jim, for all this bad news.
I know.
You're a good man. It makes me want to handcuff myself to this tree right here and stay here till I die. I'm 73. I'll get, it won't take too many, maybe 20 more years. I can do it. Bring me a lunchbox.